Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Chicken Health Handbook, 2nd edition, a complete guide to maximizing flock health and dealing with disease, by Gail Damerow, narrated by Karen White. Publisher's note: this audiobook includes bonus material. Please visit Tantor.com and type The Chicken Health Handbook into the search box. Follow the link to the book's page. Then, under the Supplemental Content section, please enter the access code BROOD, B-R-O-O-D, and then click the Unlock button to access the bonus material. The code should be entered in all lowercase letters. All figures and tables referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material. Preface. A lot has happened since the release of the first edition of this book. New technologies have changed the way we view the well-being of chickens, making us more certain of some things and less certain of others. The Internet has given us better access to academic research and to rapid communication with specialists. More people than ever before raise chickens, providing unique insights due to their diverse educational and professional backgrounds. Online poultry forums have given us a clearer consensus on the issues of backyard flocks compared to problems of industrially produced chickens, or ailments induced and studied under laboratory conditions. More small animal veterinarians are accepting chickens as patients. Indeed, many of them have chickens of their own, and today's chicken keepers are more inclined than in the past to seek veterinary care. And not least of all, I have had 2 decades of additional experience keeping my own chickens healthy. So what started out as a simple update to the first edition has turned into a complete revision. As I reviewed where to start, I first decided to expand the chapter on incubation and brooding, which ended up becoming an entirely new and separate book, Hatching and Brooding Your Own Chicks, issued by Story Publishing. I then added a new chapter on metabolic disorders and split the old chapter on infectious diseases into 3 separate chapters, respectively, on bacterial diseases, fungi, and viruses. These changes provided more room to expand on emerging new diseases, our current understanding of old diseases, and how any disease gets a foothold in a backyard flock. By understanding how disease-causing organisms work, we have a much better chance to prevent them. Critics of the first edition of this book took exception whenever I suggested that culling, euthanizing a hopelessly sick chicken, is sometimes the best option. I understand that urban and suburban flocks are smaller than rural flocks of the past, and that accordingly each chicken becomes a beloved family pet, resulting in the perspective that culling is not an option. However, isn't allowing a chicken to suffer or to spread an incurable disease to other chickens a worse option? To minimize the likelihood that you will ever reach that point, this edition focuses on a preventive approach and on methods of natural immunity enhancement. A chicken with a strong immune system is better able to keep itself healthy and less in need of being treated for one ailment after another. Make no mistake, however, the longer you keep chickens and the more chickens you have at one time, the more likely you are sooner or later to encounter problems. But you'll be less likely to find yourself dealing repeatedly with the same issues if you learn how to manage or avoid each one the first time around. This book is called The Chicken Health Handbook because its focus is on keeping your chickens healthy. By applying vigilance, knowledge, and common sense, you'll find it's not a difficult mission. Indeed, a few years ago, the United States Department of Agriculture issued a report on small flock health and management that stated, owners of backyard flocks report very few health problems. Here's to very few health problems in your own backyard flock. Keeping Chickens Healthy. Chapter 1. Healthy chickens are a joy to behold. They are bright-eyed, alert, curious, and lively as they chase butterflies or scratch in the soil and peck at a bug, a blade of grass, or a seed of grain, all the while vocalizing over their accomplishments. They regularly visit the feeder and drinker, take dust baths, groom their glossy feathers, stretch out to enjoy the warm sun, and take frequent cat naps. At dusk, they flock inside to settle on the roost, side by side for the night. Even while a chick is growing within the egg, it has the beginnings of an active immune system that continues to develop after the chick hatches. Along with other natural defenses, the chicken's strong immune system helps it resist disease as long as the bird remains in a wholesome environment, one that is clean, free of hazards, and safe from predators, one that provides adequate space, light, ventilation, fresh water, and suitable feed, and one that protects the flock from unnecessary stress. The nature of disease. Disease is a departure from health, and it includes any condition that impairs normal body functions. Disease results from a combination of indirect causes that reduce resistance, in other words, stress in one form or another, and direct causes that produce the actual disease. Direct causes of disease may be divided into two categories: infectious and non-infectious. Non-infectious diseases result from things other than an invading organism, such as nutritional problems, deficiency or excess, poisons, traumatic injury, or even excessive stress. Infectious diseases result from invasion of the body by another living organism, bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoa, and a variety of internal and external parasites. Some are always present, but cause disease only under certain circumstances, such as when a chicken's resistance is weakened because of stress. Such microbes are called opportunists. A few microbes produce disease wherever they occur. They are commonly known as germs, although technically they are pathogens and are described as being pathogenic. Variations in virulence among different strains of a specific pathogen can cause the same disease to appear in different degrees of severity, or even in different forms altogether. Speaking of disease. Biosecurity. Collective disease prevention management practices. Contagious. Readily transmitted from one individual or flock to another. Fomite. Any inanimate object on which pathogens may be transported from one place to another. Infectious. Capable of invading and multiplying in the living tissue of another organism, thus causing disease. Opportunist. A pathogen that is non-infectious to a healthy individual, but causes infection in one with reduced immunity. Pathogen. A microorganism that causes infection, disease, or death by living on or in another organism as a parasite, commonly called a germ. Pathogenic. Capable of causing disease. Primary pathogen. A pathogen that is capable of infecting an individual with a healthy immune system. Reservoirs of infection. Regardless of a disease's cause, before you can effectively control it, you need to know how the disease is introduced into a flock and how it spreads among the chickens. Diseases are introduced from reservoirs of infection, which can be any source or site where disease-causing organisms survive or multiply, and from which they may be transferred to a susceptible host, in this case, a chicken. A reservoir of infection may or may not be another living being. A chicken can serve as its own reservoir of infection, as occurs when a disease is caused by a microbe that normally lives on or in a chicken's body without causing disease. Examples are streptococci and pastorella bacteria, both of which infect a chicken after its resistance has been weakened by some other cause. A sick chicken is, of course, a reservoir of infection, as is also an infected dead chicken that is pecked by other hens. Some disease-causing organisms, such as the infectious bronchitis virus, are species specific to chickens, meaning they affect only chickens and no other type of animal. Other diseases may be shared by more than one species of poultry. Sometimes microbes that are harmless to one species can be devastating to chickens. One such microbe is the Marek's disease virus, which is common and harmless in turkeys, but potentially deadly to chickens. A reservoir of infectious microbes that affect chickens need not be some type of poultry. It might be a wild bird, or an exotic or cage bird kept as a household pet, or it might not be a bird at all. Other pets, livestock or rodents and other wild animals, even humans, can be reservoirs of an infectious disease that affects chickens. Salmonella bacteria is an example of a microbe that infects a wide variety of vertebrates, including humans. A few infectious organisms that parasitize chickens spend part of their life cycles living in arthropods, fleas, mites, ticks, lice, and mosquitoes, and can spread disease to chickens through those creatures' bites. Inanimate reservoirs of infection are non-living objects that harbor disease-causing microbes. Among them are accumulated droppings, litter, soil, dust, and feed or water in which an accumulation of pathogens survives or thrives. When a chicken falls ill, knowing where the disease came from, the reservoir of infection, can help you control the disease and prevent future occurrences. You also need to know how the pathogen got from the reservoir of infection into the chicken. Carriers. Carriers are major reservoirs of infection for many chicken diseases. A carrier is an individual that appears to be healthy, even though its body harbors a pathogenic organism. A carrier may be a chicken that has recovered from a disease, or a chicken that never showed any signs of having been infected. Either way, these stealth carriers are especially dangerous for backyard flocks because they go around infecting other chickens without offering much indication that they might be the cause. A potential clue is that other chickens fall ill while the carrier remains apparently healthy. The older a chicken is, the more exposure it has to disease-causing organisms in the environment, and the more likely it is to be a carrier of one disease or another. Since growing and adult chickens carry levels of microbes to which chicks and young birds have not yet developed resistance, mixing together chickens of various ages from various sources is always a hazardous practice. Disease happens. The vast majority of microbes are either harmless or actually beneficial. Beneficial microbes may live either on a chicken's skin or within its body, aiding digestion and/or enhancing the bird's immunity by fending off pathogenic microbes. a process known as competitive exclusion. Given the opportunity, however, some organisms that normally live on or in a healthy chicken can multiply to the point that they become harmful. Such an opportunity most commonly occurs in a chicken with an immune system that has been somehow weakened, perhaps by poor nutrition, a parasite overload, or excessive stress. In contrast to these opportunistic organisms, other disease-causing organisms are primary pathogens. These organisms are not commonly found in the typical poultry environment, but when they arise from a reservoir of infection, they are capable of infecting a chicken with a perfectly healthy immune system. Such an organism enters the chicken by being inhaled into the bird's respiratory system or taken into its digestive system with feed or water. Or the pathogen might be on or burrow into the chicken's skin, scales, or feathers, or invade the body through an open wound. How diseases spread. Once introduced into an individual chicken, a disease may or may not be capable of spreading to other chickens. A disease that is caused by a primary pathogen is more likely to be contagious than one caused by an opportunistic organism. Brooder pneumonia, for example, is caused by opportunistic fungi and does not spread from chick to chick, while ringworm is caused by a primary pathogen and is contagious. A contagious disease can spread either vertically or horizontally. Vertical transmission always involves direct contact between the infected chicken and the one that becomes infected. Horizontally transmitted diseases may be spread by either direct or indirect contact. Vertical transmission is the spread of a disease from an infected hen to her eggs, and subsequently to chicks that hatch from the infected eggs. Some viruses can be vertically transmitted to chicks from an infected cock through the semen that fertilizes a healthy hen's eggs. Horizontal transmission is the spread of a disease from one chicken to another by means other than from an infected breeder to offspring through eggs that hatch. Horizontally transmitted diseases don't necessarily require direct contact between a healthy chicken and a sick one. Direct and indirect contact. Direct contact occurs when an infected bird and a susceptible bird mate with, peck, or preen one another. Diseases that spread through contact with the skin of an infected bird include pox and influenza caused by viruses, and staphylococcal and streptococcal infections caused by opportunistic bacteria. Staph and strep infections also spread through mucus-to-mucus contact during mating. Indirect contact occurs when pathogens are mechanically transported from a reservoir of infection to a chicken that becomes infected. As with reservoirs of infection, modes of transportation can be either animate or inanimate. However, here the animal or object doing the transporting is not itself the original source of infection, but is merely giving the pathogen a ride from one place to another. Logically enough, an object that gives a pathogen a lift is called a vehicle. Vehicles of transmission. Animate vehicles of transmission are living beings, which might be wild birds, rodents, household pets, or other animals that transport pathogens on their feet, feathers, or fur, as distinct from diseased animals that are reservoirs of infection, spreading disease through their saliva or droppings. Flies and other arthropods can transport pathogens on their feet or bodies, as distinct from infected arthropods that spread disease by injecting contaminated saliva. Humans can transport pathogens on their clothing, shoes, hair, or hands when they visit each other's flocks, travel from flock to inspect or vaccinate, make deliveries, or attend a poultry show. Inanimate vehicles of transmission are non-living objects on which pathogens are transported from one place to another. They include shed skin, feathers, droppings, broken eggs, and other debris from infected birds. These bodily discharges can be transported to healthy chickens in contaminated feed or water. They might also be transported by air, which wafts dust, fluff, fine bits of dried droppings, and droplets of respiratory moisture expelled by breathing, sneezing, or coughing. Luckily, most airborne infections don't spread far. A common vehicle is a single needle used for flock-wide vaccination or blood sampling of both infected and susceptible birds. Reused items, such as egg cartons, feeders, drinkers, and tires of a car, truck, tractor, mower, or wheelbarrow, are other objects to which body discharges containing pathogens may cling and be transported. In veterinary jargon, any inanimate object on which a pathogen hitches a ride is called a fomite, from the Latin word fomes, meaning tinder. A pathogen can travel on a fomite for hundreds of miles before setting off a new disease outbreak. Biosecurity. Biosecurity encompasses all precautions you take to protect your flock from infectious diseases. The fewer precautions you take, the greater the risk that sooner or later a disease will affect your chickens. On the other hand, no set of biosecurity measures, no matter how strict, is 100% foolproof in preventing disease. The best you can do to protect your flock is to follow a well-thought-out program of interrelated measures that are grounded in old-fashioned common sense. Your biosecurity program should include the following measures. Start with healthy chickens. Feed them a balanced ration. Maintain a flock history. Provide a sound environment. Routinely clean their housing. Disinfect as necessary. Keep a closed flock or quarantine newcomers. Exclude wild birds. Minimize stress. Medicate only as necessary. Acquire healthy chickens. Maintaining a healthy flock is difficult unless you start out with healthy chickens. The best way to make sure new birds are healthy is to purchase locally, so you can see whether or not they come from a healthful environment. You can then ask the seller, eye to eye, about the bird's ages and health history, and you can see for yourself if any of the seller's birds show signs of diseases that might be carried by the birds you plan to buy. You'll have the least chance of getting diseased birds if you start with newly hatched chicks. The older the bird, the more disease problems it has been exposed to. If you do purchase older chickens, take your time inspecting them. Make sure they have glossy plumage, look perky and active, and don't show any signs of stress behavior. Flocks and hatcheries enrolled in the National Poultry Improvement Plan are certified to be free of several serious infectious diseases. Unfortunately, you may not find a member who has the kind of birds you want. Don't buy any chicken unless you are completely satisfied with its background in terms of genetics, management, sanitation, and health history. Above all, avoid chicks or grown chickens from live bird auctions, flea markets, wheeler dealers, traders, uncertified hatcheries, and any other source where chickens are brought together from far-flung places. NPIP. The National Poultry Improvement Plan, NPIP, is a nationwide collaboration between state and federal departments of agriculture to certify member flocks as being free of the following diseases: avian influenza, a potentially serious viral infection of chickens that can also infect humans; chronic respiratory disease, and other infections caused by pathogenic species of Mycoplasma bacteria; fowl typhoid, an egg-transmitted bacterial disease that kills both baby chicks and mature chickens; pylorem, an egg-transmitted bacterial disease that kills baby chicks as well as hatchlings of many other poultry species; Salmonella enterica, an egg-transmitted bacterial disease of poultry that can affect humans who eat contaminated eggs. An online keyword search for NPIP will yield detailed information on the program, including a directory of certified hatcheries and flocks. Keep a flock history. A flock history is essentially a diary that documents anything and everything pertaining to your flock. Start it the moment you acquire your first chickens, noting the date or date of hatch. If you purchase by mail, it will be on the shipping carton. Source, strain, if known, anything the seller tells you about the birds and their history, and any health certificates that come with them. Document your feed sources, feeding and management practices, and any changes you make as you go along, including vaccinations you give and medications you use. Write things down as they occur, rather than trusting your memory to reconstruct events should you later need the information to help trace a health problem. You don't need to make elaborate notes. In most cases, the date, along with a few key words, should be sufficient. The flock history table in the bonus material lists some of the information that would be vital should your chickens come down with an infectious disease. A sound environment. The way you house your chickens can influence their continuing state of health. Most poultry housing falls into one of the following categories: cage confinement, favored for showbirds and pedigreed breeders; confinement housing, favored for fast-growing broilers, breeder flocks, and floor-managed layers; range confinement, favored for pasture-raised broilers and sometimes layers; free range, favored for laying flocks where sufficient forage is available; coop and yard, the most common method used for urban and suburban flocks, and others where space is limited. Chickens raised on an industrial scale are confined entirely indoors for several reasons, among them that lighting can be strictly controlled, air can be filtered, water systems can be easily medicated, and diseases that are spread by flying insects and wild birds can be more effectively excluded. If there is a major problem, the manager will remove all the chickens, clean and disinfect the facilities, and then bring in an entirely new flock. While confined flocks are protected from some diseases, as a trade-off, they incur other health issues due to lack of sunshine, fresh air, and activity. In addition, if a contagious disease does manage to get into their crowded environment, it spreads like wildfire. Backyard chickens typically have more space to roam, as well as having access to fresh air and sunshine. They not only develop stronger immune systems, but pathogens that might wander in are more likely to get diluted by air and space. By far the most common method of housing backyard chickens is in a coop constructed in a fixed location with a fenced run attached. The
Sample complete. Ready to continue?